Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be back on here talking about super today. Super's been something I've been involved with for 7 years, and to tell you the truth, I've only really seen great things from it. And I've got a self-managed super fund myself, and I've really enjoyed it. And I'm going to talk about how you can get more active with your super, the benefits of it, and also how to actually start approaching it. So thanks for coming on this journey with me today. I'll just share. Great. So today we're going to talk about why you should actually start taking more interest in your super, what really is super, what the benefits of a self-managed super fund, and some of the investments you can get involved there. So the big thing about super is it's not an investment. It's actually a tax structure. If I said to you, I could guarantee you an investment return of anywhere between 15 and 33.5%, I imagine most of you get pretty excited and you want to actually start investing in that. Well, that's really what super is. It's the closest thing we have to a tax haven in Australia. And I'll tell you how that actually works. So the big thing about super is that any income earned on your investments is capped at a tax rate of 15%. So anything you put in there is taxed 15%, and anything that you earn throughout the year is 15%. Compare this to your actual investments held in your outside name, you'd be taxed at your marginal tax rate. So you're saving a considerable funds there. Another big benefit is that capital gains is taxed at either 10% or 15% if the investment's been held under 12 months compared to your marginal tax rate. Now, that's what's the big exciting thing about super. And I'll demonstrate actually how it can make a big difference over the long run. So let's look at an example here. Jody earns $82,000 a year and currently has a lump sum of $20,000 saved. She can also save $1,000 pre-tax income each month. She's gone and seen her financial planner to compare the possible outcomes when investing these two, inside super or outside. They're investing in the exact same investments. It's just the difference is in what structure is it held. Is it in their personal name or in their superannuation fund? So this graph represents the difference in non-super and in superannuation. So after 5 years, the difference is $18,208. You see the compounding effect after 10 years, it's now $41,835. And after 15 years, it's $72,510. And the only difference here is that we're just investing it in the superannuation environment instead of the impersonal environment. And that the reason why the difference is because you're not paying so much tax at the initial when you're putting into super, you're saving, and then you get the compound effect of investing in a better tax environment. So that's ultimately the reason why I love super. It's a way to save money going to the tax man and allowing more of your funds to actually be investing over the long term. Now, yes, there are some caveats for this great tax haven. We wouldn't just the government wouldn't just give this to us for free. There are restrictions on when you can actually get the money out. So currently for my age, 31, it's 67. So I can't actually access my funds to that amount. And there's also restrictions on how much money you can actually get into super. And that's probably the biggest thing. Everyone starts talking about, oh, I can't access this super for so long. These days, 67 isn't that old. The average life expectancy for someone my age is about 82 years old. And I have no doubt that I'm not an average person. I'm very confident I'm going to live past 100 years. And with the medical technology that's coming out there, we're going to be living for a very long time. So I want you to really start thinking that super isn't this thing that you can just worry about later. You actually need to start thinking about this now. And with all the work that we've done in our private wealth management business with older members, we actually found that the biggest problem they had was that they didn't get enough money into super early enough and let the power of compound interest work for them. So I want to talk about self-managed super, because that's ultimately what's really exciting. Every one of us has to have super. It's a non-negotiable. 9.5% of our income goes into super, so it's nearly 10%. That's a big savings amount. It's probably most people's largest investment, and it definitely will end up being people's largest investment. And it's something we have to be part of. So why not take more interest in it? At our age demographic, we're actually starting to see considerable balances, upwards of $100,000, $200,000, depending on how long you've been earning and what income. So I want you to start getting involved in your super, and I personally believe the best way to get you involved with it is to have a self-managed super fund. The big difference between a self-managed super fund and a normal super fund is that you take control of the investment decisions, and ultimately you are completely responsible for them. Otherwise, the actual tax benefits and everything are exactly the same. So why do I love self-managed super? First, you have complete control over your investments. You can invest in property, shares, startups, ETFs, cash, pretty much any type of investment. Unlike some of your industry or retail super funds, where you're just picking between a balanced or a high growth fund, or maybe some managed funds and some equity. So having that option is really great. You can combine balances for couples or family members. So you can have up to 4 members in a self-managed super fund, which means you get the benefits of sharing costs, and you also get the benefit of having a larger balance so you can access certain investments. So Sarah and myself have a self-managed super fund together. And it can also be a lower cost option as your balance grows, because generally the fees are quite fixed, unlike a lot of superannuation funds where it's a percentage of investments. So how does the self-managed super fund work? The main difference is that you are a trustee and a member of the fund. So first we have a corporate trustee. You can have individual trustees, but we won't ever recommend them because it doesn't enable you the flexibility. So it's a company structure, and ultimately that holds all the investments. That's the actual owner. So it could be, for example, ours is the FKSR SMSF Pty Ltd. The actual members are directors there, so you become a company director. Then you go out and create a cash management account where all the transactions coming in and out, so just a general cash account. And then through the company, you go out and purchase your investments. You might purchase some shares or some property, invest in startups, and it'll all be held in that corporate trustee's name. And then underneath that, you have the members of the fund. So that's in our fund, it's myself and Sarah, and the actual proportion of what we've invested in, that's our balance. All this administration, because there's a lot of paperwork and it's actually very complex, it gets done by an administration provider. We use BT Panorama technology, which is the most newest cutting edge technology out there, and you have complete online access and you've got flexibility. So and each year there's a tax return done for the superannuation fund and also an audit. Now, I don't actually like the term self-managed super because it makes it sound like you can just do it all yourself very easily. I think it should just be called like a flexible superannuation environment, because ultimately you don't want to be doing these things yourself. When I first started advising 7 years ago, I knew I wanted to be in the SMSF sector, and it took me a long time to learn all the different rules and how to manage them properly. But that's where you work with an administration provider and an advisor like us, and you actually get to work together to do it all. But ultimately, the responsibility does come down to you. So let's talk about how you could actually purchase a property in your super fund. There's a lot of stress for our generation. We feel like we're missing out on the property market. We don't have big enough deposits to be able to actually purchase a property. And we also don't want to be tied down with a property in our own name. We want flexibility. However, there's a lot of people who do believe in the property market and want to get exposure. So self-managed super funds is a great way to be able to actually invest in property. So what happens is you, as the member, make contributions into your super fund. So that's your employee contributions going in each month, and anything you might do added concessional contributions. You set up a trust. It's called a bear trust, which will go and actually purchase the property. And the reason why it's set up in a trust is that it wants to be a non-recourse limited loan. So if that property goes bad, it doesn't destroy the rest of your super fund. And there's also restrictions on what you can do there. You'll go get a loan from the bank, and the bank will, so the super fund will get the loan, you pay interest to the bank, and the bank ultimately has the loan of the property. And this is a great way where if you had $100,000 in your super fund, potentially you could go out and purchase a $500,000 property and actually pay it off using your pre-tax dollars each month from your employee contributions. Really great way to access property. Seems quite complicated, and there are added fees because in the superannuation environment, there's restrictions on the actual leverage you can get, and also because of the non-recourse limited loan, which is basically saying that it can't affect anything else. But it's a really great way to get exposure to property. And also what we like about it is it means you've got a larger, you're basically leveraging your superannuation fund. So you can have a larger exposure to the investment, which enables you to get potentially greater returns over the long run. So I want to give you an example of our fund, because one of the big things that we do at Wealth Enhancers is basically everything that we advise is built off what Sarah and I have been doing personally, because we are the same age as you in pretty much similar situations. So our superannuation fund is now, it's called the FKSR SMSF. It's now worth a bit over $800,000. How we've got there, we've actually focused on maximizing our concessional contributions for the last 4 to 5 years. What are concessional contributions? These are the pre-tax dollars we put into super. So every month your employee is putting money into super. And because we had our own company, we also chose to elect to maximize up to our concessional contribution caps, which have varied between $25,000 and $30,000 over the last 4 years. It's currently $30,000 and it's actually reducing down to $25,000 in the future. So instead of being at our marginal tax rate and say we're on the highest bracket, which is 48.5%, we got paid $30,000. Instead of it coming to our own personal name, it would have been about $16,000 that we could have invested. Instead, we put it into the superannuation environment and we actually had $27,000 to invest. So we had a lot more to start with. We also accessed the capital gains tax small business concessions. We sold a business, and this is a great one for entrepreneurs. You get a $500,000 cap where you can actually, on a business sale, put extra money into super and reduce your taxable amount. And probably the other reason why it's built up is because we've actually had quite a high risk return investment strategy in our super fund. And the reason why we've done that is we look at our whole investment allocation across everything, our personal name, trust, companies, and super. And we look at, well, where are the best place to have certain investments? And because self-managed super fund generally is locked away for a longer time, we look at it and go, well, let's have our most high risk investments in our super fund because we can actually handle the volatility. We don't need to access the money now, so we can take more risk. In the investments, we've had cash. We've invested in a really great commercial property syndicate, which is, we actually did through one of our members, Andrew McGilvray. We've invested in some speculative shares. We've had exposure to exchange traded funds, which is just a direct representation of a particular index like the ASX 200 or the S&P 500. Due to our nature in the entrepreneurial market, we get access to startup companies. And with startup companies, they're very high risk. Most of them go to zero. You actually can be locked away for a long time, but in super, we've taken some great exposure there, and we've invested in hedge funds, which can make money in markets going up or down. And what we've really loved about our super fund is it's actually given us a lot of the pleasures, like investing and getting involved in other people's businesses that we wouldn't be able to have if it was in our own name. So I'll give you an example. We've invested in a European company called Holodoo, and this is potentially a company which could become a billion-dollar company. And we invested $50,000 when it was a small company. And now they've actually kept raising more money and they're going extremely well. And we're going on the journey with them. Now, would we have invested if we didn't have super funds? I don't think we would have, because we don't have a casual $50,000 lying around that we can actually invest in a company and not worry about using. But in our super fund, we've had exposure and we've learnt a lot through that process as well. So that's an example of where you can use your super fund to be able to invest in your friends and everything like that. I can see some great questions coming through, and please actually send them through and I'll answer them as we go. I know Scott Wilson's asked about how do I know what to invest in with a self-managed super fund. Really great question. Ultimately, you should be working with an advisor and they'll guide you on how you can structure your super fund. And one of the things which you do have to do with a self-managed super fund, you actually have to create an investment strategy which guides how you're going to invest in your super fund. And depending on your risk tolerance, what you want to achieve, what interest you have, that will ultimately determine. But we have a very standard portfolio which we recommend for people our age, and then we customize it around what you like to be involved in. If you want to get more involved in commercial property, we can do that. If you want to be involved in startup companies or lending companies, we can actually do that as well. And another question we've just come through is about asset allocation. Is it risky to have property dominate in an SMSF? Really great question. So I actually like to, it's funny how people see super as something a little bit different from their personal name. When you look at most people's situation, their property is when you look at their asset allocation, it actually is the majority of their investments. And yes, there are risks in having property as your dominant investment in your super fund. And what we'd like to do is we would be saying, well, if you haven't got property exposure, potentially self-managed super fund would be the better place. Get your investment in there, and then every year when you're contributing more funds, we'll be looking at invest that into other asset classes like equities as well. So, and remember, it does look in your whole entire asset allocation. Another question which we often get asked is, when should I look at in starting a self-managed super fund? Ultimately, I think every Gen Y should start looking at it. Doesn't mean that it's right for you. It doesn't mean it's right now, but you should start looking at it and speaking to your advisor about how to start, when is the right time for you. All of us at our generation will have a large super balance, and once it's over $200,000 balance between you and your partner or just yourself, definitely a great time to start looking at it. However, for some people, it might be $100,000 if you've got a very focused investment strategy where you want to get exposure to property, you agree to maximize your concessional contributions each year. So the most important thing is to start looking at it and set a plan on how to access it. Even though we've been doing self-managed super funds with our clients for 7 years, we only set ours up 3 years ago, and we planned over those 4 years beforehand on what we wanted to get to first. Also when we had the time to be able to do it, and then once we reached a certain balance, we invested in it. So the big thing why I wanted to show our example of our SMSF, it's not to brag or show that we've got a large balance or anything. I want you to show how you actually need to plan on how you're going to achieve your SMSF goals, and also how you can build it up quite quickly. A lot of you may have, I don't know, $60,000 or $70,000 in your super fund right now, and you might be thinking, I can't actually set up a super fund. But if you agree to put in your maximum contribution this year of $30,000, both yourself and your partner, that's $60,000, and you may actually have a balance really quickly which can reach that amount. And the big thing about the self-managed super fund for me is it gives us peace of mind. A lot of people go, oh, I don't want to put money in super, I can't access it. And I go, well, I don't really care if I don't access it. I'm trying to set up insurance policies for the rest of my life so I don't have to think about it. And I'll give you an example. In 2026, 10 years time, at the rate of our super fund, how it's growing, it's going to be worth 3.6 million. And I'm just going to be just over 40 then. And even though I can't access it for a long time, I'm going to feel pretty damn good about life. I'm going to know that I just have to earn enough and to get me through to that super fund. And it's actually, I'm going to have enough money to do whatever I need to do in the future. And I have other things set up like insurance bonds, and that's how it all works anyway. And so look at super, and it's a great option. Another question, would I invest in crypto? Look, crypto, it's something that you can invest in is super fund. I think if you have a great interest in it and you have understanding of it, that's where the great thing about self-managed super fund is. You can actually take interest in, invest in what you're interested in. I think there's a lot of future in cryptocurrency, and it's definitely where the world's going to end up heading. So I do think it's a reasonable investment, but I'd have to invest a very small part in our total asset allocation. When we look at our startup investments, in our whole asset allocation, we're between 5 and 10%, and we won't be doing any more than that. The minimum balance for a self-managed super fund is really, we like to say $200,000, but it is determined on your own situation. Like I said, if you are on a high income and you agree to maximize your concessional contributions and you want to get an exposure to certain investments, we have seen it done for as small as $100,000. And we have another question, ones that keep raising the age of retirement. Definitely something that you need to take into account. This is every year there's a lot of rules that change with super funds, and I do believe they'll keep changing things. That's why we don't have all our money in super. We have options to put more money into super, but we don't. But in the grand scheme of things, if you can maximize that $25,000, $30,000 concessional contributions every year, right now, it's such a big tax advantage, and you have the power of compound interest in the future. So just before I finish up, I've got a couple more minutes, but I've got a few more questions going on. How do I invest in startup opportunities the way you have? The greatest way is to start hanging around entrepreneurial circles. Once you get into an entrepreneurial community, trust me, everyone will be asking for money. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is actually you've got too many opportunities and you need to reject them. Through Wealth Enhancers, we have a lot of access to different investments. We won't advise on them, but we'll give opportunities to people who are on our We Advance model, or are sophisticated investors who are earning $250,000 a year or have over 2 million net assets. And just start asking and you'll get opportunities, but be very, very selective. We probably invest in 1 in every 50 opportunities we have. And the important thing to know about startups is generally they want to keep on raising more money. And in order to ensure that your investment isn't diluted, you need to have funds accessible to be able to invest. So back to my example with Holiday, they just did another raise and we had to stump up another $60,000 to invest in it. So the saying goes, there's got a question about traditional super funds. We can't access the money we put away there. It's the same for self-managed super fund. The exact same rules apply. If you want to change the asset diversity, that's where self-managed super is really powerful. You can do whatever you want. We actually, with our private wealth management clients, when the GFC occurred, we pretty much went to most people's portfolios were pretty much just cash. We sold down really quickly because we didn't know what was occurring, and we just sat and watched. And then as we got more comfortable with markets, we started investing in again. So you've got complete control there, which is a really great way. And investing in commercial property syndicates, you need to find a really great property advisor. One of our members, Andrew McGilvray, is the best I've known. He's trustworthy, has a great eye, and he's been doing it for a long time. And it's just like any other investment manager. You need to have confidence in them, confidence in where they're investing, and be able to have access to it. So what to do now? If this is suitable for you, the best way is actually to find out if it's right for you and set a plan on how to achieve it. We're offering a free financial kickstart session where you'll get to identify your goals, review your current financial strategy, access your opportunities, and answer any questions. That's where self-managed super is a great one. And I encourage you all to go to this link and book in for that session. You'll find out if self-managed super is the right thing for you. Also, feel free to send through any more questions and we'll make sure we'll answer all these. And if you have any ideas for future topics for the webinar, please let me know. Thanks so much for today, everyone. I really enjoyed talking about super. The big thing I want you to take away today is that super is your money. It's going to be the largest investment you have, and it can be a lot of fun as well. So please investigate self-managed super funds, and happy investing. Have a great day.